JavaScript if statements. Now, I just have a user here. John is back. A year's passed and he's back in Johnstonville. Now, if statements are really useful to check if something is true or not. So maybe I'm looking in my friends list, and obviously in the friends list, you only show users that are a person's friend. So what we can do is just write if to check something, and then we write these parentheses. And in here is where we write the thing that we want to check. So I'll just say, let's make a variable, and I'll just say is my friend. And this can be either true or false. I'll make it a Boolean. Let's say I still like John. John's still my friend. So we can check to see if John is my friend or not. And if he's my friend, then we're going to do something. And these squiggly brackets is where we write that. So let's just say if John is my friend, then all right, he's in the friends list. I will log him out to the screen. So if I save this, it's checking to see if John is my friend. And because John is my friend, we said that was true. And it's going to log out the user. And sure enough, we do see our friend John on the screen. So that does work. Cool. But it's like, okay, we really just wrote this here. Why is this that useful? Well, maybe it's not that simple. This was kind of like a simple example just for us to kind of understand that, okay, we're just checking if something is true or not. But what's more of a useful scenario? Let's say I'm on my friends list and I'm actually trying to just see my friends that live in Johnstonville. Right now, I'm just checking for who's still in town, who hasn't moved away. And I just want to see those people. So how can we do this? We know that we have the user here, right? Well, we also have the city, right? And that's how we can select the city. And we can actually check to see if it's equal. We just write 3 equal signs to the city we want to check, like Johnstonville. And this, if user city is equal to Johnstonville, like that can be either true or false, right? It can be either equal to Johnstonville or not equal to Johnstonville. So if the user city is equal to Johnstonville, then we'll log out the user. And if we save this, we still do see John logged out to the console because that's what we expected. But let's see, what if this wasn't Johnstonville? What if John lived still in Jamestown? Well, now user city is not equal to Johnstonville anymore, right? So this is false. At this point, this is false. It's not true anymore. When the city was Johnstonville, then it's logged out, right? Because this is true, right? So that's all the if statement is doing. It's really just checking to see if this is true or not. And if it's true, then it does this. And that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, granted, it's still like, okay, but why? Like, I can just look here and see that. And yeah, that's true. We're just checking if one thing is true. But this can get a little tedious if maybe we had a lot of friends in our friends list, right? And it's not just one user that we're checking. Maybe, because remember, if we had like friends list, let's just say friends list is equal to, an array because it's a list. And just like in another video, we looked at objects. And if you haven't looked at it yet, feel free to go look at it because you'll probably be very confused without seeing it. Just like in the last one, we're actually going to put objects in here as our friends. So I'm just going to press enter so that we have some room. And I'm going to put an object in here. And then the next one is going to be another object. So this is going to be another friend. And we'll put one more friend in here. So just a list of friends. And in this array, each one of these objects is a friend. So cool. I will just give each one of these a name. Let's say bring James back. James is still in our friends list. Name. Say Shane is still in our friends list. And this third one, let's call them Jason. Jason, sure. John, James, and Jason. Getting really creative with these names here. Okay, so in our friends list, we have these 3 friends. But now that we have these many friends in our friends list, we probably could loop over them, like do a for each loop. You might remember this from a previous video when we looked at JavaScript array methods. But we can loop over them with the for each method. And you remember this takes a function And when we're writing a function, it's just like this. So I'm just gonna cut this and paste it in here. And it's gonna give us access to each friend as it loops, right? We give it access to each friend. So I will just write, here I could write out, the each friend, and we will get the friends here. And I'll just comment this console log out. And sure enough, yes, we are getting each friend. Nice. Now, here's the thing though. Let's say we only wanted, just like before when we were checking with John, we only want the people who live in Johnstonville. So let's give each one of these city, and let's say that James lives in Jamestown still. And Shayna, let's say that she moved to Johnstonville. And Jason also moved to, I don't know what I'm doing. Jason also moved to Johnstonville, right? So now we have two people who live in Johnstonville, Shayna and Jason, but James lives in Jamestown. So let's say that we still just want the friends who live in Johnstonville and not Jamestown, only the ones who live in Johnstonville. Well, that's exactly what we were doing before down here, right? We were checking to see if the city was equal to Johnstonville. And if it was, then we logged out the user, right? Well, I'm just gonna literally cut this and paste it in our for each loop. So now, and I'm also going to change this to our friend variable that we're getting here. So now when we're looping through all of our friends list, we get the friend, and then we're checking to see if the friend.city is equal to Johnstonville. And if it is, and only if it is, then we log out the friend. So let's see what that does. Should give us what we want. And yes, it does. We see Shayna and Jason, who both live in Johnstonville, but as we can see, James does not. James, all by his lonesome, lives in Jamestown, and we have checked to see if he lives in Johnstonville, and he does not. So it literally just doesn't even log his name out. And that is pretty much if statements. That's how if statements work, and that's a useful scenario where if statements work. There's another way to do this called, instead of using the for each method, we'll use something called filter, and we'll look at that later. It kind of works exactly the same way as this almost. We'll look at that in another video. But that's pretty much how if statements work. One last thing that I'll show you is a more simple example. Let's get rid of everything. And now let's make another if statement again. And just like before, let's just check to see if John lives in Johnstonville. So we'll just say user.city is equal to Johnstonville. Then we will log out John lives in Johnstonville. And sure enough, just like we expected, it logs out John lives in Johnstonville, because we're checking to see if he does. And because he does, we are logging that out. But let's say that we wanted to check if John does not live in Johnstonville. Well, when we're checking this up here, we want to check to see if user.city does not equal Johnstonville, right? So the way that we check to see if something does not equal Johnstonville, we just press exclamation mark. That's what this is called, exclamation mark. Why was that so hard for me to remember? Anyway, so we just write an exclamation mark to check if something is not equal. This is how we say is not equal. So here we're just saying user.city is not equal to Johnstonville. If it's not equal to Johnstonville, then we can say John does not live in Johnstonville, right? So if I save that, yes, we don't see anything because John does live in Johnstonville. But if we change this to like Lollipop Town, that's not how you write lollipop, is it? Y'all are gonna laugh at me in the comments. But John does not live in Johnstonville now. He lives in Lollipop Town. So this is correct. User.city does not equal Johnstonville. So we can say John does not live in Johnstonville. Nice. Okay, real quick, I'm just gonna change this back to equal. And let's write out John lives in Johnstonville again. Nice. Now, obviously, John lives in Lollipop Town. So we're checking to see if user.city is equal to Johnstonville, but he doesn't. So it doesn't log out that John lives in Johnstonville. Now, it would probably be nice if when we check to see if John lives in Johnstonville, that we do something else if he doesn't live in Johnstonville, like say where he does live. And the way that we do something else is by typing else, and then we can do something else. If John doesn't live in Johnstonville, we can just write these squiggly brackets to say what else we're gonna do. So we can actually just type out what we need to say. So let's say console.log, and we'll just write out John lives in, can't type, user.city, because that's gonna be Lollipop Town, right? So now we see, okay, if user.city is equal to Johnstonville, then write out John lives in Johnstonville, but he doesn't, right? John doesn't live in Johnstonville, so it doesn't write this. And it's like, hey, well, we're gonna do something else. And then we say, well, he doesn't live in Johnstonville, so let's say where he actually does live. John lives in Lollipop Town. User.city is Lollipop Town, so that's where John lives. And that's how if else works. Now, granted, you could check to see another thing here. You could say, well, let's see if John lives in Johnstonville, and he doesn't, right? So it's like, all right, well, we'll do something else. And when we do something else, we could also check if something is true again. So here we could write, user.city is equal to, let's say, Jamestown, and obviously this is not what we want to write here now. We want to write, John lives in Jamestown. Now, obviously, John doesn't live in Jamestown, but if we switch that now, Jamestown, hey, it says John lives in Jamestown. Because we were like, hey, does John live in Johnstonville? No, he doesn't. It's like, all right, well, we're gonna do something else. And now we're gonna check if he lives in Jamestown. And he does. Now, what if he doesn't live in both? Well, we could say we're gonna do something else. Squiggly brackets. And then we just write out the last message that we had before. John lives in whatever city John lives in. And let's switch this back to Lollipop Town. And now we see John doesn't live in Johnstonville, doesn't live in Jamestown. We're just gonna do something else again and say where he does live. John lives in Lollipop Town. So that's how if else statements work. They can be as complicated as this, or they can be as simple as this. But most of the time they're simple like this. That's how they work. Hopefully that is helpful. Now, if you would like to support and help me, wow, I'm so bad at this outro. If you would like to support and allow me the time to think of ways to help other people feel less intimidated by tech, feel free to check out the link in my description to my Patreon below. I feel like I switched those words around a bit. As always, may the odds be ever in your favor and the snacks be ever in your bag.